Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to Tech Leaders Hub. So good to have you here today with us. And my guest today is Thilo Seliger, Director of Engineering Europe at Airspace. Thilo, how are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing great, actually. We just have some really good momentum with the team, and yeah, feeling good.
Awesome, awesome. I'm very glad to hear that as well. And I'm feeling fantastic knowing that we can have this Tech Leaders Hub session today. Always the highlight of my day personally, but a lot of people are saying that they can tell. Okay, well, I'm very glad we've got this time together. And now I have just a little bit of housekeeping to do before we get started with the session, if you don't mind. First of all, dear
Sure.
watchers and listeners, thank you so much for joining us on Tech Leaders Hub, especially if you're joining live. If you're joining live, please leave us a comment that you can see us and you can hear us. It's really important. It's part of us testing that everything is working correctly here on the technical level, because this is getting recorded before you ask. But of course, attending live allows you to ask questions. We encourage you to do that throughout the show. For now, just test the comments section for us, please, okay? Let us know that you can see us. Let us know that you can hear us, and thank you so much. While we wait for these comments to roll in, Thilo, I wanted to ask you, who do you hope is tuning into this session? Who will benefit from listening to this conversation?
Yeah, I hope that some tech leaders and like similar industry are tuning in. Maybe from someone from logistics that we can afterwards maybe connect and have some discussions about the topics that we talked about or similar challenges that we have. So that would be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I will say, given the conversation that we had before this, that while it's very interesting to dive into this particular industry, I have a feeling that not just people within this industry and not just tech leaders will benefit. Usually, we touch upon, at least from my perspective, I'm a manager within marketing, and yet I always find something for myself in these sessions as well. So stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, we've got an anonymous LinkedIn user saying that they can see and hear us. Amazing. And Łukasz is also saying that it's okay. Then I'm very glad
Perfect.
to hear that it's okay, Łukasz. Awesome. Okay, it looks like we're ready to go with the session, and we're going to start in the usual way. And the usual way is by asking you the traditional Tech Leaders Hub question. Before we get into the background, your role at Airspace and what Airspace does, which is really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to getting into that. I wanted to ask you, just so the audience can get some value right from the start, the the traditional Tech Leaders Hub question is, what is your number one tip for tech leaders, Thilo?
Yeah, I thought about this before because I knew this was coming. So, but I think I have something which is kind of small if you just hear it, but I think there's so much behind it. So one thing that I think is a really good tip is to never down prioritize your one-on-ones with your direct reports. Always have these meetings like prioritized. Of course, sometimes
Hmm.
there's reasons to move it, and it's often the meetings that are easy to move or like it feels easy to move because like other meetings might be about milestones, having like
Yeah.
external partners there, whatever. But I think prioritizing these meetings always shows like so much more. It shows empathy. It shows like the how much you appreciate your employees. You get stuff, yeah, back from them, and also you need to think about sometimes people want to talk about something more difficult and they prepare for these meetings and then like 5 minutes before we're like, oh sorry, can we skip the one-on-one this week or can we have it like, I don't know, in 2 days? um,
Hmm.
I think it's small, but in the end it has a lot of impact on your team.
Yeah. You know what? I love that. And so often I feel like good management and good leadership comes down to these details, right? And this is a very
Yeah,
important detail. I have a follow-up question for that then, because I feel like a lot of managers might be thinking, okay, I don't I'm not so keen on having the one-on-one because, for example, we just spoke last week or something, and it's not, it depends on the cadence, obviously. So do you have any tips on actually, so you're keeping the one-on-one on your calendar, how do you actually get the most out of it, and how do you actually bring the most value to your direct report?
I think you mentioned a good point. That's the cadence. So I think this is really individual. I don't think you can say with every employee I want to have a one-on-one every week. For someone makes sense
Oh,
to have it maybe every other week, because you talk anyhow so much during the time in between, or you feel like, yeah, like you say, or we just sometimes it feels like, oh, didn't we just talk yesterday? But it's like a week ago.
yeah.
Um, But to make the most of it, out of it, I think it's first really to check into the people, to really like ask how's it going, what is on their mind, how you can support them, and really make it their meeting. That's one of the things I always say also in interviews about the one-on-ones. I want to have the meeting of the employee. They coming to me and they can bring anything to me. It can be problems they have. It can be critique towards me, like feedback, or whatever. It's like a safe space, and I think this works really well. Sometimes, of course, we have one-on-ones that go like 5 minutes because everything has been said before. But you never know if you don't go to these meetings and don't have them like in a way that people trust that is going to happen. I think that's the key to make them successful.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I love that, and I do emphasize as well that it's kind of their time that they can use. I actually have this one team member. When I meet with them, I always ask the same. Well, it always transpires that the agenda is already there. Usually, I just ask, okay, how many items have we got today? And they say something like, okay, 7 this time around. I'm like, okay, we better get to it. No chit chat today. We have to get through the list. You know who you are if you're watching. That I'm talking about, and cheers from Tech Leaders Hub to you. But yeah, nice and organized, and it makes for really productive meetings, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Very well. Thank you so much for this tip. It's one that we haven't had before, always unique, which I always love, that there's so many different, like you said, small things, different details to pay attention to as a leader, and slowly we'll building a library of them all, it feels like. So moving past that for now. So the topic we've got for today is Agile and leadership, specifically in emergency logistics, right? So your industry, the industry that Airspace is in, and you've been in this industry for years now. So I think it's very pertinent to talk about that, about your career path, about Airspace, what Airspace does, what you do there, and how you actually ended up here.
Yeah, sure. So actually, I started studying business and computer science in 2005. That's a while ago. And I was at the same time working at a little banking software company in Frankfurt as a developer system analyst. And then, so I spent some time in the fintech industry, you can say, banking software industry, till I then joined Tametas, which is also like a time-critical emergency logistics company in different roles, requirement engineering to developing, project management. Then for a while I joined the banking side again. This is when I got much more contact to Agile. So it was with ING in Germany, where I also became a Scrum Master in one of their pilot teams for an Agile organization, where I really fell in love with even more with Agile and how to work with it. And then after a while, I joined Tametas again because I moved to Sweden from Germany. And also there are different roles: product owner, developer, solution architect. And then I started like building the in-house development team as the head of software development. Did this for a while. Then I joined iSettle, which is fintech again. So that's my two things, it seems.
Okay.
And was the tech area manager for an area with 3 teams. And then I joined Airspace actually 1 year ago. Which is really exciting. So 1 year ago I started. I was the only one in Stockholm, and 2 or 3 weeks ago we had like our R&D meeting here with everyone in Europe, and in Stockholm now we're 10 people. So we really grew fast. It's amazing.
Yeah, wow, that sounds like a very rich career. And I wonder, maybe if somebody from one of your previous companies is watching right now. If you are, leave a little wave in the comments, or if you're from Airspace, leave a wave. I just want to see more comments. We did have one coming in when you were talking about one-on-ones. Super nice. Safinaz, I'm sure I butchered the pronunciation, sorry, is saying one-on-ones always highly appreciated with you. That's so sweet.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Cool. So I have a feeling that, we had this initial conversation and I managed to get the context of this industry, but the watchers and listeners, a lot of them probably don't have this context. So could you spend a minute defining emergency logistics for us? How does that?
Sorry.
Just
Yeah.
Yeah, so to start from the top, could you define emergency logistics for us? How does it differ from, what do we mean when we say emergency logistics?
Exactly. It's emergency logistics or time critical logistics. You can time critical maybe makes it more easier to grasp. So it's really about things that can either save lives. So for example, medical parts could be organs for transplants. It could be stuff that's really like will save a lot of money. So imagine you have like a factory running, something breaks and you need a spare part, but a spare part is either there's one of these spare parts in the whole world on the other side of the world. You need to get it as fast as possible to your plant because you're losing money. Or maybe it's even not existing at all. It has to be produced somewhere and then freshly produced, brought to the place where you want to fix something. Could be X-ray machines in hospitals that are broken, and like people are waiting for medical treatment. So everything that really is time critical doesn't always have to be an emergency. But the emergency example could be an airplane that can't departure because the engine is broken.
Right.
So that's what we're doing. So really fast delivery of goods. And it's not only the part of really bringing it fast from one place to another. It's also that when customers are coming to us, they have a pain. They want to have it solved as fast as possible. So they also want to know, like, getting a fast quote. They want to know what does it cost, and when can I expect the part being on site, because maybe they also want to have an engineer coming there at the same time to fix the machine. So what Airspace is doing, what makes us special, one of the many things, is that we automate this whole process. So actually, you say I want to send something from, let's say, Warsaw to Stockholm, and yeah, our machine learning AI routing engine is finding like the best, fastest, low risk way between these two locations, and will give you in milliseconds solution.
Wow. Yeah, and I assume that's comparing like a lot of data points, right? For a lot of different options that can be used, and still the solution comes in seconds. That's really impressive.
Yeah, I think it's like 180 million possible solutions between two locations in Europe and US. Yeah, so it's really impressive, something that a human could not do.
Yeah, it really speaks to the power of software. I wanted to ask about kind of trying to visualize what kind of cases you deal with like day to day. What is the time span usually for these shipments? Is it like somebody's calling you and they're saying, I need that to be shipped like next day? Or is it more like it needs to be there in 2 hours or otherwise bad things happen?
Yeah, I mean, there are some restrictions, like you can't have something in 2 hours in New York, but of course
Sure.
they want to, I guess they want to have it like this. So it's really depends. So it's often, let's take the example with the part that has to be produced. So for them, it's like, okay, it's in the making right now. You can pick it up tomorrow at 2. So they want to have it picked up next day at 2. Sometimes it should be picked up in the next 4 hours or 6 hours.
Wow.
So it really depends. But it's these are things which are like in a day time span. Not really that someone comes to us and says next month we want to have something delivered, because then they could go to normal logistic companies with standard products.
Okay, so that's really interesting how that gets handled. I wanted to ask about one more thing related to that. Somebody left a comment on LinkedIn that kind of threw me off, saying that they can't wait to join aerospace aviation sector tomorrow. So that's
Nice.
really exciting. Oh, apparently the name is Karen. I'm getting
Okay. Hi, Karen.
yeah. Okay. So thanks for that, and yeah, how we got that one right, and thanks for leaving the comment there. Okay, so right, so that means that probably you need to have people like on call 24/7 for
Yeah,
those different cases
exactly.
that come in.
So that's really important factor. So we're talking about tech and all the things we do there, but actually the other USP that Airspace has, or what's really important, are the people, our operations team. So these are people who are sitting like really smart logistic experts. So they're sitting there, they're talking to the customers on the phone, by email, now also on WhatsApp. So they're really in the contact with the customers, because this part is also really important. it's like something painful, and you want to also to talk to someone, or at least have contact with someone if something goes wrong, or So that's the other part. We're really having like the logistics experts sitting there, first of all, to be like the front line to the customers, but also to like, we need them from the tech perspective to find the best technical solutions for what they are doing.
Exactly, right. Of course, you need to be in contact with them. So tell me about your role in all of this, about your literal role and title, but also kind of the work that you're doing to make all of this happen.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm the director of engineering in Europe. The Europe says already that we have also our headquarter not in Europe but in the US. So Airspace is a US startup. So my role, when I came here a year ago, was to build the R&D team here in Europe, because Airspace was really strong in the US, but we want to expand to Europe and even more. So we needed to have also an R&D team here, a team that can do research, that learns about the customers, that learns about the laws and regulations that are a bit more complex in Europe between all the different countries, and to then in the end like build all these things into the system to make the system smarter, to find better routings, to fulfill needs for the customers in the different industries. So when I started here, like I said, I was the only one here in Stockholm. So I started like recruiting the team, getting the engineers on board. Now we also have additional product manager. We have UX designer. So really getting like this full package of a QA as well, having like a full functional R&D team here in Europe, with a challenge that we have an R&D team also in the US, and we're working on the same code base. So yeah, at the same time we want to be autonomous. So that's an extra challenge on top.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds like something good to follow up on in a sec. But first, I wanted to ask you. So you were building the team, the processes, and the workflow between yourselves and the US from scratch. What do you think was the most interesting challenge in all of this? That the thing that was the most interesting to actually tackle.
There are different parts. I mean, one thing that you have to, I think, is to, if you have an R&D team in the US that work together for a long time, they build their own processes, they know how the teams are split up, how they're going to work, and now comes this new team in Europe, so far away from the main base. So I think it's really important to give them the transparency that what we're doing, that we're having similar culture, that not we come here and we do everything different. We like mess up their code. We're not talking to them. So I think this was really important for me to show that they can trust us, that they have people here who have the same mindset, who want to have the same quality, who want to make everything better together. So that was one thing. So it's really important for me to sync the people. Actually, one thing we did to make this happen, we just started with an R&D show and tell session, like a global one. So where each team in the US can show off, I would say, what they are doing, and maybe some cool patterns they developed, or some cool functions in the system, or everything they think could be interesting for the other teams. And as well here in Europe, we presented what we are doing. We did this now 2 times, and yeah, it works really well. I think it gave a lot of more transparency and also good feeling. Like, okay, I know the team in Europe is doing great stuff, and we can lie back, but we can trust them that they're not messing us up.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. And I assume this is like a live call. You don't record these and send them, but it's like every people are on the call at the same time?
Exactly. So we record them. So if someone misses them, then they can watch it afterwards. Yeah, but of course it's live. So with the challenge that we have 9 hours time differences. So it was like an evening meeting for us and an early meeting in San Diego. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So is there anything else that you do? I'm looking for these because, like we established at the beginning, it's all in the small practical things, I feel like, which is what I'm always kind of looking for when I'm talking with my guests. Is there anything else that you do that might be for example, small, practical, day-to-day, but nonetheless important, that helps keep the teams in sync, do you think? Is it like a particular way of using Slack, if you're doing that, or maybe something else that you're doing to keep things transparent?
Yeah, definitely we're using Slack. We're working also on the same Jira, like that's our tool for the agile development, where we have our tickets and what we work on. So that's transparent. And then of course we have I have one-on-one meetings with several leaders over there. Right now we did also a session with every team in the US we want to do, or we started doing sessions where we just introduce ourselves, showing what we're working on right now, what's actually the vision of our team, and the same on the other side. So it all comes back to communication, being open, being reachable, and I think that's really the key there. And also when we
I
have
agree. No, sorry, John.
Yeah, no. So another thing, like especially when we have projects where we working closer together, or where we touch a domain that's actually owned or more owned in a US team, then we also have like regular sync meetings with them, where we have a kickoff meet. We just had someone from the US over here for a bigger project, for a kickoff, where we then had discussions about the architecture, how do we want to do this, how we want to split it up between the two teams, and then we have regular meetings once a week, where we just sync and see where we're standing.
Yeah, so it sounds like despite the time difference, it's worth taking this effort to actually meet with the team on the other side, actually be together on a call from time to time.
Yeah, exactly. From time to time is good, because you need to also be aware of people's work-life balance. And myself, I have 2 little kids, so it's not always nice to have late meetings. So we try to keep it a minimum. At the same time, why it's also really important.
Yeah. Work-life balance, you really start seeing it differently when you become a parent, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned that you've been at Airspace for a year now, and actually it kind of related in my mind. When you started at Airspace, my son was born, so I'm going to be a parent for 1 year tomorrow, actually. So
okay, congrats.
It really makes you think of work-life balance differently. Anyway, I was meaning to ask about, so obviously that's one big challenge and one thing that you had to deal with when you were building the team here in Europe, right? But I wanted to ask about anything else that was interesting. I think, let me say it like this. I think a lot of the people listening are going to sympathize with the challenge of building a team from scratch, really, hiring the first person, second person, third person. How do you structure that? How do you step by step, how do you do this? So I was wondering if you had any tips to share about that. What do you think helps you build a successful team, especially building it from scratch?
I think it's important before to really know the vision, like what do you want to achieve with a team? What kind of people do you need? So it's really again, like a simple, it sounds simple, but it's not as simple. You should always hire more for people than for skills. Of course, you should have people who have the skills that can work on this and work on this complex domain. But just because someone has like the perfect skills to work on this, like I'm talking now hard skills, they should really be a person who fits to the team. And you should have really diversity in the team. So diversity when it comes like the mixture between junior people and more senior people, but also in general from personality. So one really cool thing, for example, is when it comes to diversity, we're right now 50-50 male and not male people in Stockholm. That's for a dev team something special, and I think it's really cool. And then like I say, you need people who also go the journey with you. So it must be really clear if you have a new team, you need people who want to be part of building the culture. So that's something what I do. I'm not coming and saying, of course, you have like a base, like this is the process we're going to start with, and then talk about like, okay, how can we adapt this process and really get people into helping building this process, how it works best. I think that's really important. And not everyone wants to do this. There's like this idea from Simon Radley about pioneers, settlers, and what's called town planners. So we have like people who are the pioneers who want to go in. They just want to do something fast, failing, and standing up again. Like really, like rough the people you want to build like an MVP with, or what you want to start a team with, which is great. But you also need the people who then take this and make it into something scalable and something structured. So I would say you really need to have people who want to go this journey and think it's interesting to come somewhere where it's like less structure and building the structure together.
So I'm really curious how we check for that then. You're saying at the beginning you need those pioneers. Obviously it makes sense, right? Because you're building something, from the ground up. So, when you're on an interview with somebody, is there a question that you ask about this, or another way that you check that somebody has this kind of bone in their body that they can be a pioneer with you?
Yeah, actually I make really clear that we don't have these processes in place, and that we need to build this together. So I think that's something where I'm really transparent in the interviews to give people the feeling. But then I think what really helps a lot to find out how people are, we have this live tech challenge that we're doing, that we're actually doing less because of course we also want to see if someone has like a good coding understanding and everything. But if you see someone working while someone is also with you in the call, and you need to collaborate, what questions are asked, how are they approaching things, there you see a lot of the personality of the people. So you see, is it someone who, as soon as something goes off track, they totally lost, or someone who can think out of the box and ask the right questions.
Right.
So that's something that we do that really helped to understand. And then also recruitment process wise, always meet the team. I would never hire someone that hasn't met the team. So that's always the last step that we have in our process, to come to the office, sit with everyone and have a chat.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Just a few weeks ago, we had a session where that one was mentioned too, where the team was a very important part of the process. They were actually a big part in the hiring decision themselves. A lot of the responsibility was kind of shifted to the team.
Oh yeah, I heard this. This was the peer leading.
Peer leadership, yeah, with Anders
Exactly,
Kring from Lunar. If you're watching, hi. I'm not sure if Anders is watching this, but if he is, hi. So yeah, definitely, if you need to check for that fit, it's best not to leave that just with yourself, but get the opinion of the other team members.
At the same time, what's really important also, you need to be careful to not, because if you say, okay, I only leave it up for the team or for someone else, then you often have the thing that, like, you always like the people more who are similar to yourself. So you need to be careful that you not just hire the same kind of people or like the same bunch. You always need to be careful to also bring people in who are different, who add value to the team as well with their personality, because they are, I don't know, more outgoing, or they're more introvert. You also need this kind of mix in the team, this diversity. So that's always the danger, that you just hire people who are all the same, and in the end, you don't have the good effects from having diversity and different ideas, and it also helps to people to grow.
And what about, before we get to the other things that we've got on the agenda, I'm curious about something like team structure, for example. Obviously, the first people join, they probably report to you initially. But once more and more people join, do you have a rule for, like, once this many people join, it's time for like a team leader type of person? Or is there another approach they've got here?
No, I mean, that's the idea. The bigger we get, we're going to break down into smaller teams. I don't really have like rule of thumb is like 6 people maybe in a team, and then as soon as you get more, you can break into maybe teams of 4. It really depends. It also is a bit how you want to structure the organization in general. If you want to go around domains, or if you but yeah, I think that's a good rule of thumb, like 6 people, like the typical 2 pizza team. I think that's still something that's valid.
Right, and when you do split, you mentioned there's a bunch of different ways to do it. So, for example, by domain, is there a way that you've seen working for yourself as you scale?
Yeah, I mean, the bigger you get, the more you can do this domain splitting. I think for if you have smaller teams, it's a bit more difficult, especially also for this team here in Europe, where we have to work not only on one domain. We could touch anything of the of the application. Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of splitting by domains. That's something that works well. I think you have really the people who are in there. The downside is you need the people to get like also other impulses. If you work too long on one domain, maybe you get bored.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So yeah, and when it comes to the team itself, so we have, like I said, we have the full stack developers, we have UX designer, and we have product managers. So yeah, that's like the team that we have.
So,
and QA engineers,
so
sorry.
Yeah. So the next thing I wanted to ask about, because we talked a lot about the people, the team, the composition, etc. Moving away a little bit away from this, I wonder if we're going to talk about emergency logistics as an industry. The first thing that came to my mind when we were talking about this initially is that when the stakes are so high, and these are such critical shipments, etc., then you also have to kind of change your thinking, right? Because it's not that you're working on like a SaaS project management tool where if it doesn't work, then somebody's retrospective just went down the drain, right? And
Yeah.
it's not such a big deal, right? But if it's these
Depends.
critical shipments, something goes wrong, it's like, then something can really go wrong. So I wonder, do you approach software development differently, knowing that you're in this industry, that there's such a big impact, or how does that kind of work on your mindset?
Yeah, so I think that's something that should be really clear to everyone. It's also something that we put in our vision and mission, that we're actually working on something. I mean, what we do, something will move around the world, and like we said, it's something really valuable for someone. So that's something to be really aware of. Yeah, the good thing is that we have our safety net as well, like the operations. So even if something goes wrong, they are the ones who see it fast and can rescue it. But at the same time, they're using our system to see when something goes wrong. So we always have to keep in mind to show them, like, to keep away the noise from them, what's not interesting for them, and only show them the stuff that's really important. So they really fast see, okay, actually this package is not on the flight as we thought. So they really need to see this fast. So I think one thing that really works, and I mean, it's not only for emergency logistics, but I think everyone really should understand the logistics side of things, like how does it actually work, to not only work on the small feature, and that's fine, but really to understand the bigger picture and the impact what you do with what you're doing. And we try to achieve this by every time before we start something new, we do workshops with the whole team where we actually talk about why are we doing this, what is the impact of this, and then like explaining all the, I mean, coming also from the banking field, there are a lot of acronyms you need to know, but logistics is like insanely more. Like you really need to understand all these. There's like IATA codes for all the airports. You need to SOPs. Like there's a lot of acronyms you need to know, and that's something that the people need to understand. So we try to achieve this by first of all, like explaining the business part, but also having a really close relationship with our operations. So actually shadowing them, looking them over the shoulder, how are they using the system, get the feeling like when are they getting nervous, but also first of all seeing how they use the system, how they interact with the customers. But the really important thing is to see what they're doing also outside of the system. So like from the past, when I was shadowing people, you see what they do in the system, but then all of a sudden they put out a paper and like do some calculations on the paper, or have 5 Excel sheets that you didn't know about that they're using to calculate something. And then it's like, okay, can you tell me more about this? And this is then something that you need to understand why they do this, and how can we build this into the system to take this part away from them, to make their life easier, and to have really this focus on this valuable shipment.
Right. Ideally, when they're using your software, they shouldn't have 5 Excel sheets and sheets of paper next to themselves.
In the best case, they should only use our application and nothing else, so that they can really focus on. I mean, these are really, really smart logistics experts who want to. They're really solution oriented, so that which is a super good thing for the job they're doing. The bad thing is they find workarounds if something doesn't work as it should be. They find a way to make it work, but you need to find out that they found a way which is outside of the system that made it work to actually help them in the end.
So
So
that's super interesting. But that visibility, that knowledge about what they're doing, that's crucial, right? If you want to build the right software. So obviously that's a step. That's a good step. That's a good practice that you have. And I have two questions about this shadowing actually. One is, how do you do this? For example, you mentioned this sheet of paper. Does that mean that you're literally sitting next to them when they're at the office? And if it's
So that would
somebody in the
be
US, do you do it differently? Obviously, you do it differently, but is it like remote?
So I mean, the best way would be to really sit next to them in the
Of
office,
course.
spend some hours, maybe even a day next to the person. Yeah, we don't have this luxury the whole time. So yeah, there's of course like a lot of like Google Meet calls where they share their screen and you're in the call with them and ask questions. It's a bit hard to see if they pull out a paper, but you recognize they do something else when nothing moves on the screen. So then you can ask.
And then you're like, stop right there. What are you doing?
What is exactly? Yeah.
Okay, I get that. And the second question I've got about this is, do you need to do a lot of convincing to shadow them, or are they usually receptive to it? I'm just curious. Is this something that you need to sell them on? They're saying, "Oh, I don't want to be shadowed because something," or is it usually an easier conversation? Just curious.
I think everyone is really open doing this. The problem is often that it's hectic. If you work in operations, customers are calling, you get emails, you need to monitor shipments. So it's not always a good time to do this because it's also a bit stressful. Maybe someone's watching you, but normally you don't. Yeah, normally really open that you can do this. It's also really clear shadowing really means shadowing. You just want to watch. You don't want to be, and often it's mistaken for someone shadows me, I need to explain every step that I do. That's not what I mean. It's like really, I just want to see what you're doing. You don't need to explain anything, just do your normal job. Yeah,
it's like
that's
I'm
more the
not
difficult
even
part.
here, right?
Exactly. That's more the difficult part to be like really just a shadow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And circling back a little bit to what you were talking about before, you were saying that you have these workshops to just explain the business part. So I wanted you to tell me a little bit more about that. Like, how do you structure the workshops? Who is at them? Who is leading them? I'm really curious about that part.
Yeah. So normally we do it. We have a product manager in Europe as well. So together with him, and now also we have a UX designer, which is awesome. So she's also helping us. But yeah, normally we use a Miro board. I guess everyone got used to them after the pandemic. So we have a Miro board or a whiteboard if we have everyone in the same office. And then first of all, like explaining the process, like what is actually happening, and then how can I give a good example without going too deep? But there's something called airway bills, which is, you can imagine it like a ticket for cargo on a plane. So you need to have a document where all the information is on it about the parcel. And this was like one workshop where we said, why do we need this? Where is it needed? Who is interested in information? What information is interesting? What does all the acronyms meaning that you see on them? At what time of the process? So it's really, a workshop where we just go through the process and then going through all the details.
And the outcome is just that the team is now oriented within that area and they can build software for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a kickoff. So something we do in the beginning. And then, of course, the next steps is then to take part of this process. How can we do this architectural-wise? How does the solution in the system look like? How's the UX design for it? And then breaking it into smaller parts.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, it's a lot of repeating of this. Yeah. It's also a lot of repeating of the process.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Of course, because you need to. I assume it's not just this one workshop that just magically helps them understand completely and forever, right? They have to be kind of reminded, and it needs to be consulted. I see that.
Yeah. And also the one thing that's maybe also important there is this gives also like the basis to then, or the foundation to then talk to ops. for example. If it's a process that is used by ops, you then have the language that you can use to talk to them, that you're both like meaning the same thing. That's often like a big problem, that you use different words when you talk about the technical stuff, and then the actual business experts. So this also helps really to speak the same language, and that's also something we do regularly. We have once a week also a sync with the operations, where then we can bring up more questions towards the process or how it works.
Yeah, of course. And this kickoff workshop allows the developers to have the team, not just developers, to have a common language. Then that's extremely important. I can see that.
Yeah.
All right. So one thing that I wanted to add to this, well, not add to this, but I feel like we've talked about how software development feels a little bit different when you have these high stakes, but we haven't touched upon Agile yet, and some of the watchers and listeners might be curious about that. So, kind of the thesis I was trying to go with here, when framing this session and this conversation, is that Agile might not always be the best approach when you're thinking of a industry like this, of situations like this, because I see Agile as this iterative approach where you try a solution. If it breaks, then it breaks, and you try something else. That's kind of my layman's understanding of it. But I wanted to ask you just generally, how does Agile figure into software development in emergency logistics? Where does it work? Because I assume there are places where it does, and where you should probably have a different approach.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I would say Agile is always the best approach.
Okay.
And I think a misunderstanding with Agile is often, if you talk about Agile, a lot of people have like Scrum in their mind. That's exactly what comes to their mind. But Agile is more like the mindset to, you have a big problem, you cut it into smaller pieces. The main idea of Agile is that you have something that changes over time. And if you think about in the old days, I remember like when I started, we had this business requirement documents that you had to write, which was having the business case. Then someone else was writing like a functional document about the business document, and then someone was writing a technical document about the functional document. And the best case, it was the same person, because then you would not lose anything. But in the worst case, it was 3 different persons. So in this time where this was written, it was already, everything has changed already. And you were developing something that was outdated. But when it comes to our industry and Agile, I think it's still the right approach, and also what we're doing. Of course, you need to be careful about things like I just said, ops, they have a really stressful job. They need to be sharp. They need to see when something goes wrong and all these things. And if you do something that breaks this process for them, that's a problem. So what we often do is that we then say, okay, we still do it in an Agile way, but we only give this feature to specific users. So instead of rolling it out to everyone, we say, okay, we have 2 pilot users in ops that are aware that maybe something will break if they use it, so they know it. They're not going to be surprised, or they're aware of this, so they can react on it. And with them, we are testing. We're going into a beta phase, so to say, or an MVP phase. And as soon as this works well, and we did our iterative approach, we improve, and at some point they say, okay, now we feel confident enough that everyone else can use it. Then we roll it out to everyone else. So it's still an Agile approach, but a bit more careful, I would say.
Yeah. So when you ship something, it's not to everyone, it's to a limited number of people. Is there anything else that you change in your approach, still being Agile, but being a little bit more careful? How does that manifest itself?
I think being a bit more careful is the main thing to think about. But also one thing that I learned is also it has a bit to do with Agile also. So if you work with business experts, especially if they are not technical, then they have a bit different understanding of what you need to explain to them first, what Agile actually means. So one example from the past, where we were building this new system, and everything was great, and we thought, okay, we want to involve everyone. Agile, you involve business, people over processes. Let's involve the business parts, and we were showing them wireframes, which means like no design, just like this is how these are like the modules we're going to work with. And then we had a session where it was like 2 hours discussions about buttons, about why is this in this color, why can this be here, or like the examples that you're showing there, that doesn't make sense. No one would fly from this airport to this airport, or like you had discussions you don't want to have. You just want to talk about the functionality and if it makes sense for them what they're seeing.
Okay.
So that's something I learned. You should either you have people who have this good technical understanding that you can involve really in this early stages, or you involve them in a way that you directly show something like click dummies or because otherwise you have discussions about things you don't want to talk about actually.
Right. So now that you've had this case, for example, is there something that you do in advance to help these people understand that Agile a little bit better, and that this is just a wireframe? Is there something you do in advance to kind of prime them?
Yeah, I mean that's something that you definitely should do. One thing which we just did recently, so it already starts with the roles. So if you talk to someone who works in logistics or in banking, some not tech industry, okay, here's a full stack developer who's going to talk with you. They have no idea what a full stack developer is doing. So what I just did, like some weeks ago, I did an analogy for the R&D roles to airplanes. So I explained them, if you think about full stack developer, that's like an engineer who can fix an airplane from the outside. If something is broken on the outside, but they could also fix an engine. That's a full stack developer. They can work on every part of a plane. Or UX designer, someone who would like design a cockpit in a way that the pilot can intuitively, even in stressful situations, find the right button. So they start understanding what are the roles actually doing, and then you can also start explaining the different parts, like what is a wireframe and why we use it. But yeah, I really have bad experience with showing wireframes to, to business users. So even when we explained that this, don't care about the colors, don't care about how it looks, it's more about like what we have there. It's a bit hard sometimes.
I love that plane analogy. I'm sorry, I have to ask, did you have an explanation for the plane for the other roles as well, like QA or anybody else?
Yeah, QA are the people who, after a plane was repaired or built, they will like testing the plane before it flies the first time. But they're also the ones who try to break the plane with different scenarios, like maybe in a what's it called, like air tunnel, wind tunnel. So yeah, that was the explanation for QA. And what else did we have? Product managers. These are the ones who like plan that the plane is efficient, and the return of the invest of the plane, that really the plane is built in a way that we make money with it. That was the different analogies we had.
Awesome, yeah. Yeah, I feel like when you're talking about a complex domain and, software development and logistics are just two complex domains just meeting each other, right? You really need to use these analogies to make things a little bit simpler. So thank you for elaborating on that. So I'm curious about one more thing. So you mentioned, I have a feeling that, this thesis that Agile might not always apply. It's like there's a big asterisk next to that. Is that you said something that seems really important, that Agile, in your opinion, is always the best approach. So can I ask you, why do you believe in Agile so strongly? What is it about that approach that you think makes it, that is making you say that it's always the best approach, actually?
Yeah, because everything is heavily changing, and you should be prepared that stuff will change over time. So I think that's why this is, in my opinion, one of the reasons why it's a really good approach. I always have seen, doesn't matter how defined. Of course, there might be industries like which are really like strongly regulated, maybe medical industries where you have milestones that they need to check along on the way of the development, a lot of stuff, but still in between these milestones or what you need to do. I think it's really important to cut it into smaller pieces, to not take the whole thing, work on this 5 weeks or longer, and then deliver it. so that's one thing, to really be able to change something also last minute. But also I think for the developer well-being, if you think about, it's such a simple thing, but moving a ticket on a board from to do,
Right.
in progress, to done is so satisfying.
Right.
But if you work on something for 5 weeks and you feel like there's no progress, I mean, of course there's progress, but it's not visual to someone outside. I think it's also something to do with well-being, actually, to really feel I achieved something. And the other part is when you cut something into small pieces and try something out and it fails, or this also gives you a different way of thinking about the solution. You think it much better through in a different way than if you only have this huge ball of mud in front of you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I sympathize with that, because when I'm working on something, big, complex, sometimes my first step towards that is I need to gamify this somehow.
Yeah,
I was looking, I was working on finding like new marketing partnerships, and the thing that really unblocked me is like I started a sheet, and for each of those potential partnerships, I started filling out just every kind of cell in the sheet: contacted, 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 contacted.
yeah,
At the end of the day, it just helped me feel that I achieved something. So this momentum
yeah,
and this psychological part of the endeavor, I think, is something that should not be overlooked. So right, and you're
no,
saying this
exactly.
all comes down to kind of breaking work down into smaller pieces, right?
Yeah, and not
Okay.
only, but that's definitely one thing that you need to do. Of course, you need, like, you don't have to break it down, and everything that you break down has to be something that you deliver and can be used directly.
Uh-huh.
That's sometimes something you can't do. Like I said, like maybe in medical industries, maybe also sometimes for us, if we break something down, um, in the end it only makes, because if you have a small delivery that you bring to ops, for example, then maybe the first one, the MVP, would make their life even more difficult because now they have to do
Mhm.
something manually that they maybe did before on like a piece of paper that they were used to. So sometimes it doesn't make sense to roll it out all the time, but at least you should have small pieces that you can merge to your branches, or that you can deploy. Maybe don't turn it on, or turn it on for specific users, like I said before. So I think this mindset really helps a lot, from a developer perspective, but also in general to have a good overview.
Okay. Okay. Right. That makes a lot of sense to me. So, you know, I just checked the time of our session. It's like we're already 52 minutes in. I don't know
Oh,
when that happened. Or we're closing in on the end here. Watchers and listeners, if you have a question, I almost kind of forgot to ask you along the way. But if you have a question, that would be a good time, because we're quite close to the end of the session, sadly. What I wanted to ask is about this. I feel like there's more to explore here, potentially, about the leadership aspect. So I'm imagining, it feels like this industry is one with a lot of responsibility resting on your shoulders, right? Because these shipments, like we mentioned, they're so critical. They need to get where they need to get on time. Sometimes it's life or death. And you're leading a team of engineers responsible for making that, happen, making it happen fast enough for the shipment to be successful. I wanted to ask you if that somehow influences your mindset as a leader. Does it influence how you talk with your people, how you give feedback? Is there something that you might be doing differently if you are in not such a high stakes industry, but because you are in emergency logistics, you're doing it that way? Long-winded way to ask the question, but I wanted to basically ask about your leadership approach given the industry you're in.
it's difficult. I mean, I worked in this industry for a long time now, also as a leader, and I actually had the same approach also when I worked, for example, at iSettle in a fintech. Um, but reflecting on this, maybe it's really trying to find ways to have quality in the code and in the stuff that we do, and also having the team being self-organized around this, that this comes really clear to them. So actually tomorrow we're going to have a session about like our principles, how we want to how we see quality, what does it mean in our code, and so on. So that's something that I always, maybe that's the reason why, but I think that's something that's really important for me. You should write code that it's easy to understand, that is reliable, that you have these processes in place, that the quality is there, that you have a lot of automated tests to make sure everything works fine before we roll it out, and that you really own. Everyone should really own what they're doing. So if
Right.
you work on a feature, the job is not done as soon as it's deployed. It's still like your baby. You should
Right.
be like, yeah, if something happens there and doesn't work, you should be like, okay, I want to see why and fix it. So this quality mindset, I guess that's the reason why I have it.
Right, exactly. That makes perfect sense to me, honestly. You mentioned reliability along the way there, and when you're dealing with software like this, it's critical that it's reliable. Otherwise, like we mentioned a few times before, it's the consequences can be really dire, right? So yeah, I feel like trying to imagine that meeting about principles, I can see that reliability might be part of it. Right?
Yeah.
Just trying to picture myself there somehow, like a fly on the wall. Anyway, all right. So we're very close to the end of the session. Usually, just to make sure that I haven't missed anything with my questions thus far, usually I ask, is there anything else, within this topic or that you want to just share in general with tech leaders at large that I haven't asked about that you would like to, leave our watchers and listeners with, something they should do, something they, should maybe get acquainted with, some sort of process or concept that, that you would recommend to them? Anything else to share?
Yeah, one thing maybe, just because it's something I also right now, what I myself want to do more, and I think it's really important, especially as a tech leader. Even if you're like, you should not, like, as a leader, you should maybe not code every day, or not be a really active part in coding features, because otherwise the team will only fix your bugs and do nothing else anymore. But I
Yeah.
think from time to time you should put on your IDE and developing a really small feature that hopefully no one is waiting for, just to
Mhm.
like feel what the team is doing, and have an understanding where we have potentially bottlenecks, or where there's pain for the team. um, I think that's something I think is crucial, and is often forgotten in the daily chaos of being a leader, all the other things that coming to you. But really, yeah, I think that's important from time to time, at
Yeah.
least.
You know what? I agree with that. I mean, the usual advice is delegate, 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 right? But I feel like from time to time, you have to engage that muscle. I mean, for me, it's not coding, but it's writing. From time to time, and this is actually what I do on Tech Leaders Hub. I insist on writing the copy myself. So this is my kind of opportunity to still exercise that muscle while the team, a lot of my lovely content and social media and SEO team do a lot of the rest of the work, most of the rest of the work. So with the other projects that we've got there. But yeah, I feel like that's a good tip to leave, and also it leaves an impression, right? Oh, okay, this particular function, Thilo wrote that, right?
Yeah.
They're gonna notice. All right, cool. And that brings us basically to the end of our session. Just a few minutes to go, so we're gonna do the usual announcements. Well, Thilo, first of all, and for the first time, not the last, definitely, thank you for being a guest
Thank
and
you.
sharing what you know. I feel like a lot can be learned from this session, and our watchers and listeners got a lot of value. Now, I wanted to ask if you have any kind of announcements, from your end, any place you want to direct the watchers and listeners to. Maybe they should follow Airspace. Anything else that you might want them to do?
Yeah, I mean, definitely follow Airspace. We have always like some really interesting articles. For example, our director of AI, Ksenia, is often giving also some insights, like how we work with AI, which I think is something really interesting to a lot of people. So yeah, follow us on Airspace on LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you mentioned somewhere earlier here that if somebody wants to kind of continue the conversation, this was
Oh yeah,
interesting to them, that they can reach out on LinkedIn to do that.
yeah, definitely, please.
Okay, yeah. Most of our guests say that. It's funny how that works. Okay. In the meantime, I just wanted to say one word about STX, if I may. Some people might be meeting us for the first time here, STX Next. We're the company bringing you Tech Leaders Hub, and we are Europe's largest software development company that specializes in Python, and we also do JavaScript, DevOps, machine learning, design, and a lot of other things. If you want to build your digital product faster, better, get some guidance on how to build it right, you can reach out to us on stxnext.com and learn about everything that we do. Meanwhile, for more Tech Leaders Hub, just go to techleadershub.com and you'll find previous sessions. You can also find us on Apple, Google, and Spotify. I think, Thilo, you mentioned you were listening to us on Spotify earlier, because this is a podcast too. This is also there's also an audio version of Tech Leaders Hub if you prefer it that way. I actually do. When I'm washing the dishes, I occasionally listen to an episode and kind of give feedback to myself. So, and also the best way to stay in touch with these live sessions, if you want to ask your questions, is to follow STX Next on LinkedIn. This is where we are the most. This is where you'll see clips from Tech Leaders Hub, as well with kind of the best bits from previous episodes. Just today, I saw a clip from Yadek Faith, our product consultant, and he was sharing something about product strategy. Really nice clip. You should check that out. So follow STX Next on LinkedIn, go to techleadershub.com, and if you have a need, go to stxnext.com. That's the things that you might consider doing, and that will definitely support the show too. So thank you for that, and that brings us to the end. Thank you, watchers and listeners, for spending your time with Tech Leaders Hub. Whether you joined us live or whether you were just finished watching the recording, that's really nice of you either way. Thilo, anything more to add before we sadly go offline here?
No, just thank you, everyone. That was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks everyone, and thank you again, Thilo, for being our guest. I'll see you. Oh, I did want to mention, we do have 2 more sessions lined up. Mark your calendars, because we're going live with Tech Leaders Hub again on Tuesday. We're going to be doing the top 3 challenges faced by high-level tech executives with Jason Noble from CTO Academy. And you can also check us out on Wednesday, so that's the very next day. It's an interesting session called "To Build Multiple Successful Startups, Build Well-Balanced Teams." So you can check our schedule on stxnext.com, and you can also check it on, again, STX Next on LinkedIn. So be sure to check that out, and I'll see you again, hopefully, on Tech Leaders Hub. That's the end for today. People are saying thank you in the comments. Lovely. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. I'm really hitting end broadcast now. Great. Thanks.